She was the youngest partner in the firm's history, brilliant, bold, and utterly alone. Every night, as city lights faded and her office grew quiet, a black man with calloused hands and kind eyes cleaned up the pieces she left behind. He never said much, she never asked that, until one night, she looked up and said, "Do you think we could start right here?" What followed wasn't just a conversation, it was the beginning of everything she'd been missing. Every night, long after the last attorney had slammed their briefcase shut and the office lights had dimmed to a soft glow, Elijah Brooks arrived, with a mop in one hand and a quiet kind of dignity in his step. He wore the same faded blue uniform, clean and pressed, and his worn-out shoes barely made a sound against the marble floors of Morgan and Crane law offices. He wasn't just cleaning a space, he was preserving it, maintaining a kind of quiet order in a world that hardly noticed him. No one really spoke to him, not out of rudeness, but out of habit. He was part of the background, as predictable as the potted plants and the hum of the overnight air conditioning. But one person always saw him: Emma Crane. Emma was the youngest partner the firm had ever seen. Sharp-tongued, high-heeled, and relentlessly focused, she was often the last to leave. She never said much to Elijah, just a polite nod, a glance up from her mountain of paperwork, maybe a faint smile if she wasn't too stressed. But she noticed how he worked, always with care, always the same routine. First the lobby, then the break room, then her office, and every night, he'd pause for a moment when he entered her space, waiting to see if she needed anything before he quietly swept around her without disturbing a single file. There was something about the way he moved, slow but purposeful, like someone who carried more than just cleaning supplies. He had a presence that lingered even after he was gone. Emma often found herself watching him from the corner of her eye, wondering who he was beyond the mop and gloves. But she never asked, and he never offered. On one particular night she sat hunched over her desk, eyes aching, a tiny flickering candle stuck into a cupcake beside her, a lonely attempt to mark her birthday. She thought no one remembered. That's when Elijah glanced over, pausing just long enough to say in his deep, weathered voice, "Happy birthday, Miss Crane." She looked up, stunned. Their eyes met for just a second, and something shifted. In that quiet exchange, something human, something real, passed between them. Emma blinked, caught off guard. "How did you know it was my birthday?" she asked, her voice softer than usual, touched by something she didn't fully understand. Elijah gave a quiet smile, leaning slightly on the mop handle. "You hum when you work late," he said. "Same tune your mama used to hum when she brought you here as a little girl." Always around this time of year, her heart skipped. She hadn't realized anyone even remembered those early days. Back then, her mother had been a paralegal at the same firm, often bringing young Emma along when she couldn't afford a babysitter. Emma would sit on the floor with crayons, making colorful drawings while her mother typed furiously at her desk. Elijah had been there even then, quietly sweeping, always with a nod and a kind word. It hit her all at once. He had witnessed her journey, start to now, and she had never stopped to ask his name. She stood up, suddenly feeling the weight of her own silence. "I'm sorry," she said. "I never even thanked you for everything." Elijah shook his head. "Nothing to thank me for, just doing my job." But Emma saw something flicker in his eyes, gratitude perhaps, or surprise, maybe both. The distance between them, once silent and habitual, now felt like something that could be crossed. She motioned to the second chair at her desk. "Would you like some coffee?" It wasn't just a kind gesture, it was an invitation, a beginning. Elijah hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I'd like that." He placed the mop gently against the wall and sat down, looking almost unsure of how to belong in a chair usually reserved for clients and colleagues. She poured 2 cups of coffee from the pot that had grown bitter hours ago. The office, once sterile and cold, began to feel warmer, alive with a new kind of connection. That night, the law firm didn't feel so lonely. To people who had existed in the same space for years, separated by habit and assumption, finally seen each other, and in that simple act, a remembered song, a shared drink, something quietly profound had begun. From that night on, everything began to shift, slowly, gently, like morning light creeping through closed blinds. Emma started staying just a little longer, not because of deadlines, but because she began to look forward to those few quiet minutes when the office no longer belonged to lawyers and egos, but to something more human. She began leaving out 2 coffee cups each evening, one beside her papers, and one just across, near the edge of the desk where Elijah always stood. No notes, no words, just the cups. And every night Elijah would pause, glance at the small gesture, and take the seat with the same care he took in everything. They talked, not about cases or promotions or mergers, but about real life. Emma learned that Elijah had raised two daughters on his own after his wife passed away in the early 2000s. He spoke of them with pride, one a nurse, the other a teacher. He worked nights so they could have days filled with light. She shared her story too, how she had worked her way up in a firm where she always had to prove she was strong enough, smart enough, tough enough, and how, somewhere along the line, she had forgotten what softness felt like. One night, after a long silence between them, Elijah asked quietly, "Why do you stay so late every day, Miss Crane?" She didn't answer right away. The question settled over her like dust in sunlight. Then she said, "Because I'm afraid if I slow down, I'll lose everything I worked for." Elijah looked at her, his eyes kind, steady. "What's the use of winning if you forget what love feels like?" He said. The words hit her harder than she expected. It wasn't pity or judgment, just truth. A truth wrapped in years of wisdom and quiet observation. For a moment, she couldn't speak. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not in this building, not in years. That night, after Elijah had gone and the office was still again, Emma sat with his words echoing in her mind. She realized he hadn't just seen the mess she left behind each day, he had seen her, all along. Elijah didn't show up the next night, or the one after that. At first, Emma thought maybe he had the night off, or switched shifts. But when a new custodian came in, younger and unfamiliar, she felt a sudden hollow weight in her chest. She asked quietly, "Where's Elijah?" The new man shrugged. "Hospital, I think. Heart trouble. Heard he collapsed on the job last week. Another building." Emma sat frozen coffee halfway to her lips. The thought of him, kind, steady, always smiling, lying in a hospital bed alone, stirred something deep in her. That night, she didn't stay late to review files or answer emails. She sat at her desk, staring at the empty chair across from her. The second coffee cup sat untouched. Her eyes drifted to the mop in the corner, the one he always leaned against the wall like a faithful companion. It was strange how much silence could say. All these years, she had been surrounded by people, clients, partners, assistants, yet it was the janitor she missed. The one who had remembered her birthday, who knew the tune her mother used to hum. The one who asked her why she was afraid. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she looked up the local hospitals and found him. The next day, she walked into the quiet, sterile hospital room and saw him lying there, thin wires taped to his chest, eyes closed. "Elijah," she said softly. His eyes fluttered open. When he saw her, confusion passed over his face. Then something else. "Miss Crane." She smiled through the lump in her throat. "Emma," she corrected. "I wanted to check on you." He tried to sit up, but she stopped him. "You don't need to prove anything," she said gently. "Not to me, not ever again." She hesitated, then sat beside him, reaching for his hand. "Elijah, do you think we could start right here?" He blinked, unsure. "Start what?" She looked around at the pale green walls, the heartbeat monitor, the silence, then back at him, with kindness, with honesty, with something real. He smiled, his voice low and cracked. "That's the best offer I've had in years." Elijah returned to work a few weeks later, not with the same pace or strength, but with a calm steadiness that spoke of someone who had nothing left to prove. This time, things were different. People noticed. Not just Emma, everyone. It started with small things. An intern greeted him by name. One of the senior partners held the door open. Someone left a thank you card on the janitor's card. And then one morning, just beside the front entrance of Morgan and Crane, a new plaque was mounted on the wall. It read, "In honor of those who serve with quiet dignity like Elijah Brooks." Elijah didn't say much when he saw it. Just stood still for a moment, hands folded, eyes misted over. Emma stood beside him, watching. "You deserve to be seen," she whispered. He looked at her with a soft smile. "So do you." And from that day on, every night before she left, Emma made sure to place a small note on her desk. Simple, handwritten, folded in half. Always the same words. "Thank you for seeing me."